everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on a question: how to avoid massive AI cause unemployment. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Modisma and Professor Robin Daly. You know that our institution start training uh, with corporations and with universities uh, for AI training, and definitely Professor Modisma's training uh, uh, also integrated in our program. And Professor Modisma, what you want to discuss, and we have our short video about your training program. So after your first round discussions, we will share with our audience.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I wanted to tell you about a product we're working on. It's called the AI Mastermind. Our thought was that the biggest problem we're facing short term with AI is that at the World Economic Forum, they predicted that 85 million jobs would be lost over the first 2 years. That's actually a huge number. The number is 2 to 3 times greater impact than COVID. And the problem is, COVID was just a temporary exogenic shock to the system. Uh, 80%, COVID jobs have actually been all regained, so we're all back to full employment from before the pandemic. But the jobs lost to AI, about 80% of them will be lost forever. So there needs to be some way to fix that. And we didn't think that just claiming that universal basic income will magically happen would work because there's a lot of resistance to that idea. So we thought the best thing we could do was to create a new way to do training that would be that would give a disruptive advantage. So we wanted to use AI to teach AI and then use peer coaching to bring in the human factor and see if we could get a somewhere between a 10x and a 100x improvement in the cost of training. And that's basically what we've done with this system called the AI Mastermind. And we have a little video, although it's a little bit too long to show today. I would be happy to just have you show the first few minutes of it, and then we could return to
Hi,
that.
I'm Moses Ma, and I'm here to talk about the AI Mastermind and the Manhattan 2 project. So let's just start from the beginning. The first thing I wanted to share with you is that the biggest problem we're going to face short term around AI isn't that, Skynet's coming in, it's going to end humanity, but the impact of AI job losses. At the World Economic Forum, it was predicted that 85 million jobs would be lost to AI by the end of 2025. That's actually twice or three times the impact of COVID. The CEO of Coursera said, people have never seen anything like this. And the issue here is that COVID was a temporary exogenic shock to the system, and the colony survived. And you can tell because basically every job that was lost has been regained in the last couple of months. The jobs that will be lost to AI, 80% of them are gone forever. And there's in the American bee industry, there's a significant number of the beehives have died off. So when they investigated, they found a problem called colony collapse disorder. And they found out that if you lose 30% of your worker bees, then the entire hive will die out. And it's because they're tightly woven ecosystems. Humanity actually lives in the same kind of beehive structure that in that when there are shocks to the system, for example, the failure of Silicon Valley Bank is a very good example. It didn't cause as many jobs to be lost, but it led to the beginning of a recession that required billions of dollars to be spent to try to prevent it. And that's what we'd like to do without having to trigger a recession. Is it possible for humanity not to shoot itself in the foot? So that's the question we wanted to answer. So the answer is kind of obvious. AI job skill training is how you can actually deal with this. If you could train everybody in the world, then the transition is actually much more smooth, because that training also involves innovation training, so you can create your own business afterwards, or the ability to switch into some other field. It would enable a deeper level of flexibility, so that society could transition over in an optimized manner. But the problem here is that AI skills training is not rapid and it's not cheap. It requires a level of cognitive effort that's similar to learning a musical instrument or learning a new language. It takes months. If you ask anyone who's ever used Midjourney to build images, they didn't learn it in a couple of hours. It literally took months, because the interfaces are hard. The system has a lot of function that we don't understand. So it takes a while for us to explore it and to learn it. Plus, the developers throwing new features at it very rapidly, so you're constantly learning. Because it takes months, this kind of training is expensive. A really good example is Wharton Executive Education offers an AI literacy course for $12,000. And generally, you can't find anything on the internet for under a couple $1,000 to teach you how to become proficient at an AI skill. Yes, it's true. There are a lot of these internet marketing people saying, oh, for $97, we'll make you literate in 3 hours. That's just marketing. They won't actually be able to get you to a place where you could hang your hat or get a new job based on this. So what we wanted to do was seek a way to enable massive training, massively scalable training to hundreds of millions of people by reducing the price point to under $100. Would this be possible? So we spent some time thinking about it, and we came up with the AI Mastermind concept. The main ideas here is, one, it uses AI to teach AI, so it has that leverage point. And the second thing is, if you think about it, the most impactful class in your personal history usually wasn't a subject, it was usually a teacher. Somebody who really believed in you, trusted in you, gave you that edge so that you could succeed. How do you reintroduce that EQ back into the system so that you can improve the efficacy of training? And we do that with peer coaching. So the AI also not only helps you learn the skill, but it helps people coach each other, use peer coaching methods. So the system it's been tested, and we're deploying it now. Our next big deployment should be at a large bank that we're negotiating with, and we're hoping for a over 50% success rate at a price point under $50 per employee. That's actually very aggressive, so we'll see how we do, but we're hoping we can actually pull this off. The other issue that we're doing is, once we do figure it out, it may take us a few tries to get it perfected, but we're going to open source this so it can train as many people as possible. This is something the world needs, because to have any chance of us not shooting ourselves in the foot like a species, we basically need to bring this to 100 million people, and that's not possible through anything other than open sourcing it. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Moses Ma, for your excellent plan. Professor Robin Daly, what you want to discuss for today's session?
Well, it's hard to follow Moses on this. It's very well put together in a very nicely articulated argument. I'll take a little bit different path here. I think Moses indicated that the number he's working off of was something like 85 million unemployment. I'm working off a much larger number. The issue with this particular cycle is, in prior cycles, and much of the forecasts we do as analysts are based on historical precedents. And the historical precedents with regard to talking about an industrial revolution is that every time we have an industrial revolution, new jobs open up, often more jobs open up, more creative jobs open up than the jobs that are displaced. But the problem with this industrial revolution is the tools that we're creating are designed to replace people. And the people that we're designing the tools to replace are the people that are in short supply. We started off with this idea, and I attended a conference at Dell World back in 2012, where a couple of the guys that actually wrote one of the books on the fifth industrial revolution were standing up in front of the audience, and they were saying that they were arguing at the time that everything we thought about this revolution was wrong. And the reason that it was wrong is because the belief at the time was that AI was going to come in and it was going to take low-level jobs, and automation was going to take low-level jobs. It was going to take assembly line worker jobs. It was going to take call center jobs. It was going to take the jobs of people that were relatively inexpensive. And then the industry came up with Baxter. And Baxter was a robot that was designed to take those low-paying people's jobs. And Baxter failed spectacularly. Didn't fail spectacularly because it didn't work. It did work. It failed spectacularly because it was more expensive to deploy than the people that it was trying to replace. And so they came back and said, yeah, we're wrong. And the way to apply technology and automation and AI is really with the high-paying jobs, because then you can justify the cost of the robotics and training the AI. Actually, I didn't use training. I'm adding that because that really came into play after we had this latest raft of artificial intelligences that live off LLMs. And so now we understand training costs. In fact, I should point back that one of the big mistakes that IBM made with Watson, and the reason why Watson is in the center of all things, since it was really the first industrial level AI, is because they didn't take into account the training cost. The hardware was trivial. The training cost was more than most companies could afford. And so they buy these Watson systems and they couldn't afford to train them, and untrained, well, they're not really worth much of anything. So now we get to the current generation of AIs. They're being designed to take the place of employees. They're being designed to take the place of employees that don't exist. So one of the areas that low cost that AI is taking is fast food workers. And it's taking the place of fast food workers, not because of the economics, not because we pay fast food workers a lot. It's because nobody wants the job. More important, and this was something I learned during the process, was that cooking fries apparently is incredibly dangerous, because what they really wanted right off the bat was something that automated the fry process, because that's where most of their injuries and their medical costs were coming from. So that goes not to the cost of the worker, but the cost of maintaining the environment, the system that was in place, these workers that were being constantly harmed by oil. And then they started to say, well, we can't really get workers for anything else either. So why don't we explore fast food restaurants as like they're large vending machines? And now we've got several trials in place where you've got fast food restaurants that either don't have any employees or maybe have one maintenance worker that's trying to keep furiously running around trying to keep everything running. Employees are displaced, but it still costs. It wasn't salary cost in this case. It was a cost of lost business. It was the cost of medical costs associated with particular jobs. And so the AI revolution is coming in on two vectors. It's coming in on cost benefit, which makes sense. We do most of our things on cost benefit. So that means people like me are actually at risk now because we're highly paid, very costly, and much of what we do is analytical, and computers are really good at analytical tasks. In fact, one of the big arguments that we're having right now, at least in my side of the industry, is whether or not we should replace CEOs with AIs. You might have people reporting to CEO, but the CEO role has been so bifurcated into different subordinate roles, COOs, CTOs, and the rest, roles that didn't exist in my youth. The CEO doesn't do that much, yet the CEO's salaries have become astronomical. I mean, a material portion of the revenue of a company. You take Musk's salary alone at Tesla, that's a significant portion of their. I mean, that's a major portion of what otherwise would be their R&D budget. And of course, Tesla isn't exactly going in the right direction now. So I don't know what the heck they figure they're getting from that investment other than negative press and energy. And an AI won't do that. An AI will do what you program it to do and carry it forward, and is able to make the big decisions on facts, not on ego, not on personality, and doesn't have a lot of the problems these people have with keeping it in their pants, behaving ethically, and not abusing their power. So there are huge problems as we look at this in terms of the classes of people that are going to be displaced. And the one other point I want to make is, if we're using AIs to fill jobs that we can't fill, a lot of the jobs that we initially can't fill will be the bridge jobs we would otherwise be creating for the new employees, for the employees who we're displacing from the old jobs, because they're not filled yet. These positions people aren't even trained for yet. So it would be far faster to train up a series of AIs, because once you train one, you can replicate that AI relatively cheaply. And as I mentioned yesterday, and Jensen Huang has said now on several presentations, the cost of spinning up LLMs is going to rapidly drop towards zero. So that $100 million cost of creating these things now goes to the hardware cost, the physical plant you're building, the software cost goes down to something that is not even material anymore. And now you can start using these things in places you would have never considered before. And again, where you don't have people. And so your choice as a manager, as an executive, is going to be, so do we spend the 2, 4, 6 years to train up a human to do this job and all that time suffering because the job is not being done? Or do we spin up an AI in 1, 2, 3 months, or eventually 1, 2, 3 hours, and maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes, and fill that job with the AI? And by the way, with that AI, we don't have to worry about unions. We don't have to worry about healthcare. We don't have to worry about salaries. We don't have to worry about morale. The AI will just do the job we ask it to do. I don't see that as a hard decision. Now, AI really isn't capable, fortunately, of really stepping in all places yet. But the charts I've got that show AI capability against human capability, at least right now, those that are doing research say we're at parity. We still have to train them up. We still have to create the instances. We have to create the virtual humans, if you will, the digital twins of existing employees. That work all has to be done. But the tools exist now. The capability exists. We can do things in simulation that we couldn't even dream of before. You know, one of the conspiracy theories that floats around here is whether or not the moon landing was faked or not, whether it was done in CGI or not. Well, we couldn't do that back then. We can do that now. So our other little issue we're running up against is our ability to perceive reality is being absolutely destroyed. We've got people that not only are seeing deep fakes and believing they're real, there are people that are seeing what's real and believing they're deep fakes. The result is we as people are becoming decoupled, and when we become decoupled, we become less valuable. And as we become less valuable, the argument only strengthens to replace us with AIs and decision makers that we believe will make the decisions better, that won't have confirmation bias, who won't come up through argumentative theory and believe that we have to be right even when we're not. We believe that we can train AIs to solve that problem. However, there's one problem with that theory as well, is that as we train the AIs, we're training them with existing data sets that we are increasingly compromising through our inability to tell between what is real and what is false. In a way, we're kind of, without more effort in terms of making sure and don't get me wrong, the AI Alliance is focused on trying to solve this problem. They recognize that the data sets are being compromised. They recognize that AIs are starting to hallucinate. They recognize that these we'll call them demigods that we're creating to do everything are going to be incredibly flawed unless we fix the training side of that. We get that. On the other hand, we're moving so incredibly fast and against revenue promises that are short-term unachievable and that will blow out long-term. The end result is our motivations are not solidly focused on the ethical creation of AIs. They are solidly focused on the monetary benefits of this creation. The end result is we're heading for some rather big disasters, the biggest of which, I think, at least short-term, war, certainly automated weaponry is a huge problem. But the problem I'm thinking of is, what do we do if we suddenly unemploy some multiple of 85 million people? If suddenly those people are not only unemployed, but they're unemployable, where no matter how fast we try to retrain them, by the time they're retrained, the jobs they retrained for are now being done by AIs. We need to fix this problem. The ability of the planet to survive this kind of massive unemployment just fundamentally doesn't exist. And so figuring out a way to create a blended solution so that not only are we able to deploy the tools we want to deploy, but we're able to take care of the population that not only currently exists, but will exist at that future time frame. We need to find a purpose for people post-AI. And until we do that, the end game here is pretty dire.
Excellent.
So, you want me
yes.
to respond to that?
Sure.
Yes.
We can make it a discussion. It's much
Yeah,
more fun
okay.
to have a discussion.
Okay. First, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but our first large engagement will be for over 500,000 people. So we're going to test it. So we think if we could prove this in an entire country, other countries will do this. And I think it is possible to teach enough AI skills that we don't have a massive, caustic transition. Instead, it would be somewhat smoother. And the other key is in our system, 2 of the 6 modules are actually about how to do design sprints and how to understand customer insights so that you can build new products and innovate. Because the key is the people who are getting laid off, they have to create new jobs.
Right.
And large companies don't create jobs. It's always individuals that do that.
Well, and back to the question that Sharif, the question that Sharif just put up on the screen, I think the path we should be focused on is not this either or path. It's either human or AI. It's got to be a human plus AI path. We have to think about how do we integrate people with the AIs so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We have to, as part of our plan, consider that we need to design a system where we not only remain viable, but we remain important to the overall solution so that the human touch remains important. We can certainly engineer ourselves out of anything, but then what's the point? We're not evolving. I mean, one possible future is AIs do all the work and we just sit back and we enjoy the benefits. But if you've ever seen anybody that's raised like that with lots of wealth, they don't have to do anything. While some people escape that particular trap, most do not. And they either die young or they have an uneventful, painful, and pretty much pitiful life. We don't want that for our people. We don't want that for ourselves. And that means the underlying design as we approach this has to integrate people in it. We have to be talking about enhancing people with artificial intelligence more and replacing people with artificial intelligence less. We need to create a system that is inclusive, not exclusive. But the path I'm afraid we're on right now is the exclusivity path. It's the path where AIs and not people survive. And I think that's a huge mistake.
I think there's actually one additional danger for companies that rush to replace people. It doesn't take much for a demagogue to get people to start picketing in front of your company offices and chanting, "Robots will not replace us." So someone's going to be picked out. A demagogue will pick on some companies that are quick to lay off in order to impact them, like they were trying to do to I forgot the companies that made $700 million from Fox, but those voting machine companies, right?
All right.
So you could demonize them, but they'll fight back. But that's still going to be a really bad short-term impact to some companies. So I think companies are actually going to be somewhat slow to start. But once the feeding frenzy starts, when your competitor has laid off 90% of their staff and they're actually doing better work than you, everyone's going to follow suit. And
agreed.
My one my core belief is that people are stupid and corporations are actually stupider, and they're going to act like the beginning of the pandemic where everybody hoarded toilet paper because it's a prisoner's dilemma, right? And everyone's going to pick, I'm going to shoot the other guy and then try to make some suboptimal solution to save myself. But yeah, I think we're definitely facing interesting times.
Yeah, interesting times is as you'd likely know, because you said it, is a Chinese curse. The question is how do we dig out of it? And talking about the policies or incentives that encourage companies to do this, I can't think of any greater policy or incentive. It's just reminding them that AIs don't buy products. If you keep doing this, you are evaporating your customer base. You're going to need to sell stuff. Now there is an old Twilight Zone episode that has Robbie the robot in it, and it was very prophetic. The story goes, it starts off with a CEO, and he's replacing all his employees level after level with automation. His HR guy eventually quits, said, this makes no sense to me. His head of engineering quits, says, you're just destroying the company. And then finally, in the last scene, Robbie the robot has his job, and he's lamenting about the fact that he's completely destroyed not only all these lives, all these people's lives that put in the company, but he doesn't have any purpose anymore either. So he's accomplished something that wouldn't have been his goal to begin with, because he wants to be meaningful. Yeah, he ended up with a lot of money, but he's in a bar lamenting the fact he has nothing to do with his life. And that's the end we're all looking at if we don't do this differently. But robots don't buy stuff. And we're based, the entire economy is based on a consumption model. And so as you lay off more and more people, not only you're going to create massive social unrest and potentials for violent revolutions, because unemployed people that are unhappy aren't exactly sitting home watching TV. They go out and do stuff, and mostly stuff you don't like. But most important, robots don't buy. The entire economy collapses. And the reality is, as you go through this automation, nothing keeps your job safe either. I mean, at some particular point, somebody's going to say, yeah, you're right. Your job ought to be automated too. And you're also done with nothing to do. The goal needs to be to help us find a better life, not help us find unemployment.
The term in Europe for what you're talking about is the nanny state, where the state's basically taking care of you and paying for stuff.
Right.
We are working with the treasurer of a state in the U.S. about public-private programs that would help, where we could tap into the state training funds and actually train people and get. And the model that we're using is to have corporations apply for the money when they take the initial training. When they train all the way through the organization, they get a rebate for the training. Or better yet, you can actually. There's this interesting program called the CDFI, Community Development Financial Institutions. They can support government-backed loan guarantees. These loan guarantees are generally used to help minority and women-owned businesses, but they recently started doing supporting climate change companies and providing guaranteed synthetic collateral for these climate change companies. So one thing we're discussing are AI-backed companies where people are trying to start AI businesses and to create jobs. So in that case, you'd actually have to have a plan for creating jobs in order to qualify for a loan guarantee. So I think that kind of thing is also possible. Anyway,
you're doing it. Yeah, that's certainly possible. And the thing is I think those policies, those programs and policies should be expanded to encourage people to create, to prioritize AI technologies that complement human labor rather than replace it. The incentives that take a look at companies, much like we took a look at companies and provided incentives and certain disincentives for diversity programs, incentives that encourage you, that allowed you to bid on deals if you had diversity programs, and locked you out of deals if you didn't. And while there's kind of here in the States, there's kind of a pushback on that now, which is unfortunate. The fact is those programs do work. And this is a case where you could incentivize programs that blend people and technology, or that focus on companies that are creating technologies that allow people to be competitive against their AI counterparts, more competitive against their AI counterparts, and focus on protecting the race and making us, better, happier, more content with the future we're going to have, as opposed to simply being unemployed.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So we need to get more people on this panel where we could disagree, Dr. Sharif.
Well, it's really, if we're people, it's hard to disagree with this one because we're kind of arguing.
Yeah.
We don't want to be obsolete.
yeah. We don't want society to shoot itself in the foot and cause another recession. It's like causing a landslide, right? It's like the last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
How can governments collaborate with industries? One thing I will talk about next is that when we developed this product, we actually thought, okay, what's the benefit to the employee? It's the learning skills. What's the benefit to the government? Avoiding a recession.
Right.
The benefit to the company to pay for this, it wasn't as clear because they're still, even if it's only $10 a user, they still need to put out the money.
Right.
And reducing the number of people laid off, it helps their brand, but it may not actually help the bottom line. So we
Agreed.
actually added a technology to it. So you're obviously aware of ERP, right? The
Yep.
Enterprise Resource Planning. So we've actually bundled a free tool in there we call ARP, or AI Resource Planning, which allows the students of the class to identify hundreds of potential places to innovate and to create GPTs, and then manage that as a portfolio by the company. You can actually say, this one's better, that one's better, do this one first. You can manage the pipeline of innovations and even integrate the patenting of certain ones. So this whole concept of ARP is, I think, another emerging area that would be very powerful to start pushing. And if you think about it, no one's doing that right now, right? They're just they're still experimenting, like, yeah, let's do this training, let's do this. They're
Right.
doing one-offs, but they're still not organizing and optimizing the process of enterprise transition. And what we notice is that when we show this tool, the companies all go, yeah, this makes sense. Because we're training everybody, and what we get out of it is the extraction of corporate knowledge, which is extremely expensive usually, right?
Well, and right now we're tracking about 85% of the AI implementations are failing. It depends whose number you use. I think Gartner's at 85. I've seen others upwards of 90% failing, which isn't uncommon. But what you're talking about is a methodology where you better assure the success of your AI efforts, because you're focusing the technology and where the problems exist and where knowledge of the problems exist. And so it's more to our focus. It's less than the shotgun approach. Like, yeah, we got to deploy AI. We're going to make it for your customer interface. Yeah, do customer interface. It's all, if what Bob's doing over at my competitor and I got to do that over here, it's currently not being based on analysis and looking about where best to deploy the tool, where it's most needed. What you're talking about is doing that, and it's got to result in a better outcome than we've got now.
Yeah, and actually the missing ingredient is simply estimating the ROI of those improvements.
Right, it's
Like,
planning.
what is
It's
it's planning
basically
the
doing plans.
cost and
It's thinking through the decision.
yes. And the funny thing is that if you train your people to like vote on which ones to do and which ones, and estimate which ones are going to have the biggest impact, and collect that data, your company becomes a neural network for figuring that out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Basically, you get a force multiplier.
Yes.
The company itself, what you're doing is building on the whole, and everything gets stronger as you proceed, as opposed to you're creating. The other way you do it is you throw the technology in there and you create a bunch of disconnects between the dependencies and the technology because you didn't think it through. It's like putting a super powerful engine in a car that wasn't designed for it. You're just going to break stuff. And you're going to break stuff fast. You need to take a holistic approach. You need to build it as a system, so then the system itself, like, we get back to that, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's the only way you get to that. Otherwise, you're more likely to break things as you make changes. And what you're doing just simply makes sense.
Yes.
By the way, what's the name of your company again?
It's Future Lab.
Future Lab. Got it.
Yeah,
and the product is AIRP?
No, the product's called AI Mastermind, ARP. We haven't named it yet because it's so new that we don't know what the right name for the product is. But the class
AIRP works for me. But
really?
Don't get me started on naming. I did naming at IBM, and the one rule that I'm somewhat famous for, is the only thing everybody will agree with when it comes to a new name is the guy that came up with it's an idiot.
Yeah. So I think the current working name is ARPBot.
It's what?
ARPBot.
Yeah, whoever came up with that name's an idiot.
Yes, that's
sorry.
me. I accept that one. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Sharif, any more questions?
Yes, there are more questions. Yes. What strategies can be employed to ensure a smooth transition for worker affected by AI-driven automation?
Yeah, my product. That'll be smooth, but the issue is that I think the goals of a corporation have to expand from just the financial goals and like quarter returns and shareholder value to include social impact and things like sustainability. One of the things we tell countries is that AI is sort of like an enemy and a partner, and you have to think about using your military to help deal with it. and not fighting AI, but like use the smarter people in your military to become trainers for the rest of the population. So I think what I tell people is that the first country to go like 100% AI literate will actually make more money than anyone else because it's actually an opportunity. And a lot of companies don't do that. They're sort of just wait and see what happens because everything's kind of stable. So we'll see how that works. But yeah, I think the best thing to do is expand your corporate charter to include social impact and to care more about your employees. Rob, what do you think?
So I think the question is how do we convince government to do this? And I think we can do this through we've got tools now that we didn't have before, and we can do this through simulation. The being able to build a model that looked at labor trends and forecast them forward on a state or nation state or nation level scale, we can do now. And that's probably what we should have to do, because to convince a government to do something, you've got to convince the populace that the problem is real, it needs to be prioritized, and that their votes will help the outcome that we've convinced them that they want. If we can do that, then we convince the government to embrace the overall goal and move forward. And right now we have the capability, whether or not we can motivate somebody to create the graphics and use their influence to carry those graphics and that capability into Congress or all governments, is a little iffy at the moment, but we have the tools. The question is do we have anybody that has both contacts and the will to make that argument? But we could create a simulation, a very realistic simulation that would showcase the world that would result if we don't do this, if we don't take into account the unemployment, where it's going to exist, how we're going to handle those people, and perhaps come up with a plan to avoid those outcomes. Then we're going to experience them real time. And through simulation, we can do a far better job of convincing people that future world is something we don't want and something we want to resource prevention against.
You know, one of the tools in our toolkit when we approach a government is a paper we've written with a leading economist that proposes doing a microeconomic simulation of technology transition, and then looking at where what percentage could you actually lay off before you start having a significant probability of a chaotic transition. One thing I'll tell you, since you're an analyst, we found this one technology, instead of just running a simple Monte Carlo simulation, there's this new area called simulation optimization, where it takes a simulation and it runs. Right now they're using QUBO, the quadratic constrained binary optimization, and it actually gives you the ability to optimize the simulation dynamically to find those answers.
You probably can change the underlying elements and see what the outcome is going to be. In a way, you can kind of determine the best path forward by looking at the outcome of the decisions, and depending how complex the model is, taking into account the things you otherwise would have ignored and likely made a wrong decision from.
Yes. Yeah. So this the issue is that what you're talking about is actually an NP complete problem. It's very difficult to do. So this approach could actually get around that and give you a breakthrough in the area of optimizing your simulation. So that's in our paper, and we're presenting it to, for example, the California Council of Economists, and saying, would someone like to co-author this with us? And the economists we're using presents regularly at the World Economic Forum. So theoretically, once we have it written and do the simulation, we'll present in Davos next year, which I think would make a change, especially if we open source that simulation for every country.
Absolutely, make a huge change. Is there a link to this effort? I mean, something I could point. I write too. So is there some place I could?
Yeah, the project we're calling it Manhattan 2, because what we need to do is equivalent to a Manhattan project. To train 100 million Manhattan2.team. We couldn't get .com. So if you go there, you could connect in, and you can also just write me, and I'll be happy to share the paper with you and talk about that. Okay.
I don't think I've got your email address. If you could put that in private chat, I'll copy that now.
Sure, I'll do that right now.
Thanks.
Okay, Sharif, what's the next one?
My next question is like if you share some of your story of your future lab consulting, and Professor Rob, if you want to share more of your view, then we will want to go for closing remarks.
Okay.
Professor
You
Moses.
want to go first, Rob?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So Future Lab is a venture studio. So what I want to tell you, the reason we want to do a venture studio instead of a venture capital firm is we're basically a venture capital firm with no money. So we just put ideas in, and then we help our companies find money. The reason we do this, if you look at the success rate for venture capital, it's about 1% for big hits and maybe 20% for getting your money back. If you look at a company like Idea Lab or the Y Combinator, their
Right.
success rate is significantly higher because they actually care about each company instead of telling them to hit for the rafters and try to get me a home run every single time. By taking less risk, it actually increases the chances of a successful outcome. So our approach is to try to get a higher success rate out of our ventures than the typical fund would. But yeah, we have a number of companies. There's a term in microbiology called coagination. It's when single cell organisms learn how to become multicellular life, and it caused the Cambrian explosion. So we're focused on coagulative technologies. How do you actually bring the human species to a level of coagination so that we could do things together instead of fighting each other? Right now, the human species is roughly at the level of a slime mold, which has this miraculous ability. Like if there's no food, it could decide, oh, let's get together and literally walk a bunch of amoeba over to a new area and then, fall apart again and then start eating. So this ability to move to places where you have more money or more food is the ability of single cell organisms to combine and do things. So I think human beings are like single cell organisms currently, but the emergence of the internet, the emergence of things like DAOs and even corporations allows for greater and greater abilities for collaboration. And I think that there's something coming called big coagination, where you have millions of people working together really dramatically. Examples of that are the Human Genome Project, where you had scientists that were competing, learning to work together to solve that problem. Linux is a good example. You have millions of people working to build an operating system. And I think open sourcing is a very good example of that. So we're very interested in coagulative technologies. We might even change the name to Coagination Ventures. Okay.
Thank
Cool.
you. Professor Rob.
I'm a technology analyst. I'm standalone, senior research fellow for Giga and Forrester. The research organizations reported to me for research direction for a period of time. Trained through the IBM CEO program, but that program taught me one thing, and that's I never wanted to be a CEO. So I have breadth both in practical and practical knowledge and education. I was a senior internal auditor and auditor in charge field at IBM as well. And so I've got cross training in manufacturing, accounting, finance, what am I missing? Operations, security. And I've run efforts in all the sales, run efforts in all of those on the research standing. I'm unique in that I don't focus on anything. I know all things, but a master of none. Is the idea, but I'm typically used and hired when you've got difficult problems or when you need somebody that understands how things must interoperate for it to work. I learned early on that if you focus on something, the difficulty you have or the risk you have is that focus area may become obsolete or uninteresting, in which case you have to retrain. So I just trained on everything. So then the result throughout my career, it's allowed me to pivot from interest to interest, and allowed me to be very eclectic and almost never bored. So it's been great for me. My clients tend to be the largest multinational technology companies in the world. Technology companies a few years back, to a large extent, took competitive analysis and some of the other functions and effectively outsource them to analysts. And so that's what kind of created my career path, going back to Gideon Gartner, who came up with the idea that financial analysis was kind of boring and excessively stressful. And if we could focus on technology, not only could we provide help that would cross companies and help to actually create the future, but it would be much more interesting, and it would allow companies to get access to resources that they otherwise couldn't afford. A lot of us here at the top would be very expensive if we were employed inside companies. So that's me. It's an interesting skill set, and it's certainly been an interesting career in life.
Thank you. Professor Modesma, do you want to add any closing remarks? Anything you have in mind?
No. Well, if you're interested in what we're doing, come to AIMastermind.team. If you're a government entity, we'd love to talk to you. Come to Manhattan2.team. All right? That's it.
Thank you.
Sorry, that last part was AI Mastermind.
Team, TEAM. Join the team.
Join the team. Okay, got it. I'll make sure I cover and publish that. Okay, back to AI in terms of closing remarks. We've got a chance to do something really right here or really wrong. I think we're on the wrong path at the moment. We really need to think about integrating AI with people. We need to think about our end game. What will people do once AI reaches critical mass? We need to remain focused on the ethical use of AI for the betterment of humanity, not the replacement of humanity by AI. If we don't make that particular pivot, I should add one more thing. We really need a well-funded AI defense. The chance that one of these AI tools is going to jump the tracks and do a lot of damage is virtually certain. And we currently don't have the defense of this. We can't do what we did with nuclear weapons, where we started dropping bombs decades before we figured out a defense. In fact, we still really don't have a defense for bombs being dropped. This AI stuff could have a much bigger impact, catastrophic impact, than nuclear bombs could ever have. But the path to mitigating it is much easier. It's hard to stop an explosion. It's pretty easy. It's much easier to create a defense against something that is physical and potentially moves far slower, machine speeds. But nuclear bombs tend to be pretty much instantaneous. So we can develop defenses. We really need to have a better focus on an AI defense. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Thank you, Professor Modesma. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.